Welcome to Tucson, Arizona, home of the University of Arizona Wildcats, the saguaro cactus, and an inexplicable amount of sketchy Circle Ks. But if you've never been to Tucson, Arizona, you may not know that it's also home to a ridiculous amount of old school survivor trucks like this one right here. This is a 1984 Chevy K20 3/4 ton 4x4 pickup truck with a 4-speed manual. And while I couldn't convince the owner of this one to sell it to me, I'm doing the next best thing, which is shooting a review, and I'm going to show you all the cool things about this truck and what I love about it. Back home in New Jersey, my days consisted of seeing white Audi crossovers, white Audi sedans, and if you were lucky, maybe you'd see an Infiniti. But as you might know, it was a huge shock to me when I came here to Tucson, Arizona, and at every intersection, everywhere I turned my head, there were dozens of people driving these old pickup trucks as everyday drivers. If you saw one of these back in New Jersey, either the person knows or they paid $100,000 to have it fully restored. But here, people are still using these things every day and putting them to work. First up, I want to touch on the styling of this truck. There is nothing friendly about it. The bumper is made of solid steel. The headlights are sealed beam units made out of glass. It looked like someone took a hammer and a pick and chiseled this thing out of cinder block and slapped a Chevy logo on it. You could tell this truck was designed to get knocked around and worked hard, and it doesn't give a crap what you think about it, but it ends up looking just plain badass, and I love that. Next up, I want to take the opportunity to talk about the ground clearance on this vehicle. Look how much space is under here and under the sides of the cab. This thing has amazing angles to go off-roading or driving around a work site. On modern trucks, you have all these fairings and side steps coming down and different bodywork for aerodynamics, and it just makes the truck so delicate when you go to off-road it. But on this thing, it's so high up. On a modern truck, you'd have to lift it like 6 inches to get this type of ground clearance, but this one is a stock truck, and this is the way they came from the factory. Now, under the hood, what we don't have is a twin turbocharged and supercharged 2-cylinder making 400 horsepower. Instead, we have a classic Chevy small block 350 V8 that probably makes less than 200 horsepower, but it's incredibly overbuilt and reliable, and what makes this truck so durable when you're going around on work sites and maybe even off-road. While it is incredibly reliable and robust, the owner tells me he's been averaging a fine 9 miles per gallon in mixed driving with this thing, so it's definitely something you're going to have to save a little bit of money on the side if you're going to be going on long trips. He also tells me this truck has dual gas tanks that you can fill up to 40 gallons with, but he tells me that's actually not all that crazy because when you factor in driving at 9 miles per gallon, this thing burns gas pretty quick. Another cool thing about this truck is that it has front disc brakes, and by modern standards that doesn't sound like anything crazy, but back in the 80s, this was kind of a big deal as vehicles were starting to implement disc brakes, and Chevy was so proud that they had disc brakes. On the brake pedal, there's a big emblem that actually says disc brake on it, so every time you press the brakes, you know you're going to come to a stop in maybe a quarter mile. Another thing about old trucks is it makes your daily life so interesting. This truck has just so much character. Even when you do simple things like opening and closing the hoods, this nice creaking noise reminds you that you're driving something interesting, and then when you slam it shut, you hear that American iron. It's just great. Another really cool thing that I love about this truck is that it's a standard cab. You almost never see this nowadays, now that people are buying pickup trucks to haul their family around and go to Whole Foods and carry a massive payload of 1 strawberry while getting 15 miles per gallon. You see, back in the day, people used to use their trucks solely for work and then reserve their sedans or wagon for family duty. Next up on the interior, there's no touchscreens, there's no heated seats, no heated steering wheel. Instead, you have your AC, your tape deck, and a big old stick shift sticking out of the transmission tunnel. This thing is a 4-speed automatic, but the low range gear is really just a crawler gear that you can only go up to like 5 miles an hour with. So it's only labeled 1 through 3 on the gear selector, which is crazy. I have never seen a vehicle ending in a 3 on the gear shift, but this is an old truck and that was pretty common back then. Now, the owner tells me it's fine going around town and doing basic things, But once you get up onto the highway, you can't really go over 55 miles per hour because in third gear, the engine is revving way higher than is optimal. This vehicle is not designed for highway use like modern trucks are. This is also not a vehicle you want to be rear-ended in because there's no headrest, and if you get rear-ended, your head will just slam into the rear window. In fact, it might actually act like a crumple zone because when you hit it, the whole thing will just shatter. Another crazy thing is that I've driven a lot of classic cars and a lot of old cars, but I've never been in a vehicle, except for this one, that doesn't have a headliner. Instead, it's just solid steel up there. Now, this is a bit of an inconvenience, but the only benefit is because of the sun-faded paint on this car, if you ever go to repaint it, all you have to do is just look at where the headliner is supposed to be, and you have a perfect, pristine sample of what the truck should actually look like on the outside. So it could actually come in handy. Sitting in the bed of this truck, you're reminded of the archaic roots of this vehicle. And while these trucks are becoming increasingly popular amongst people looking to drive something vintage, something cool, it's important to remember the roots of these type of trucks. The owner tells me that when he bought the truck, it was in nice shape and there was only one sticker on the rear window. It said Bow Hunter by choice. That sticker is a reminder that these trucks used to be used by people who would go out into the woods. They were hunters. They were not necessarily the types of people who were looking for something trendy to drive nowadays. And appropriately, the owner has now replaced that sticker with an I Heart Tortoises sticker, which actually probably refers to this truck since it's quite slow. Alright, so we are driving the K20. I have wanted to drive this thing for so long. First thing you'll notice is power is actually pretty good. The gear shifter is so imprecise. It's like incredibly hard to drive because you're just constantly trying to find the gear where it goes in. And there's like a whole space over here. And there's like no way to know where it is. It's not like the gear lever in like a sporty car where it just slots right in. This, you really have to kind of work hard to find where it goes. And then once you're in, it cruises. Steering is horrible. You can go like this and the truck does nothing. Absolutely no movement of no change in direction. The brakes are actually pretty good. I will say that. Funny thing is, when you go into first gear, it doesn't feel like you've really done anything. It's just like, this is it. That's first gear. And a couple of times I thought I didn't find it. So now we're rolling. Clutch is very easy to use. Easier than a lot of cars I've driven. Power is great. Love the sound of a V8. I haven't driven a V8 in so long. It's just awesome. The ride is surprisingly comfortable. Now, the owner was telling me the ride is rough, but by my standards, I've driven quite a few cars with aftermarket suspension, and just looking at this truck from the outside, I thought it would be pretty rough. And don't get me wrong, it's not a luxury car, but it's totally daily drivable around town, you know, whatever. It's extremely comfortable. The seats are so soft, and like the backrest is great. Tons of room in here. Surprisingly comfortable, honestly. And you just feel so cool driving this truck. Look at this person in their Buick crossover. People give you the right of way in this thing. As you can see, I totally missed that gear. It's really difficult to find it. The owner tells me not to worry about it. It's just part of driving this thing. Now we're here on a rough road. It kicks you around a little bit, but I guess the tires are so big and there's a decent amount of travel in the suspension. My God, I must own one of these. This thing is so cool. Now the brakes, you really have to get into the pedal before they do anything. But once they actually engage, they're quite good. Power is excellent. I guarantee this light's gonna turn yellow. I'm going through it. There's a cop. All right, now we're cruising 40 miles an hour. Is this gauge accurate?
I would not trust it.
It says 45. It doesn't feel like 45.
I bet you're going 5 to 8 slower than what it reads.
Let's try and downshift. Not bad.
Yeah, it's really not ridiculous.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, totally drivable. If you, wow, that's a sick Ranchero.
Yep.
If you wanted to drive this thing every day, you totally could. Just don't think it's going to be like a Lexus. Yeah, and another thing I've noticed about this truck is just driving around here, we've seen several distracted drivers within like 3 minutes of driving. And what I've noticed with this truck is you really have to be paying attention. It almost makes you a more mindful driver. Just because you like can't be checking Instagram stories while you're trying to find second gear in this thing. And you're driving down the road, you gotta really make sure you're in your lane because the steering is sloppy, it drifts all over the place, and the brake pedal doesn't engage right away. So if you're looking down, if you're on your phone or something, and someone pops out in front of you, you know, you're gonna be screwed. But driving this truck, you learn early that you really need to be watching what you're doing, and it's honestly a great experience. You feel more in touch with the vehicle, you develop a connection with it, and if I owned this truck, I could sure as hell tell you that I wouldn't be selling it anytime soon. Thanks so much for watching. If you have an interesting car in the southern Arizona area and would like to see it featured on my channel, feel free to email me at the address below and I'd be happy to take a look.